Okay, I think we're going. Are we live? Everyone in the chat, can you see me? Can you hear me? I think we're going. I think we're going. How the heck are we doing? Welcome back to another stream. Is this going? Good now? I think we're good now. Can anybody? Yep. Okay. All right, cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Rodney. Welcome back to another stream. And today, oh boy, we got a lot to talk about because Patrick Graham is back and better than ever. Just making sure everything's good to go here on my end because I clicked live the first time, it didn't really work. But it seems like everything's good now. I am excited, Donuts, about the defensive coaches, especially. Obviously, we'll talk about Patrick Graham, but Rob Leonard, and we got a new linebacker coach. I think everything's going to be great for us. My name is Rodney. If you already know that, thank you so much for coming back and watching another stream. We do this every Thursday and Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And look, this is going to be awesome. We're just going to get into it right here. And, I think this is the first live stream I had since the Pete Carroll press conference. I'll give you my quick take on that. I just want to make sure we're absolutely going here. I think we're going. Yeah, we're going. Okay. So my quick take on the Pete Carroll press conference with SpyTech. I think that's the first time I've been on since then. Happy, really, really happy. I'm not gonna lie to you. Ben Johnson was my first choice, but ever since I've seen Pete Carroll, who is not even close to 73 up here, or even physically, I'm extremely excited to see where we're going with this. And the idea that he said, we don't have 5 years to build this thing from the ground up. Me and John Spytek are going to start with the players that we have. We're going to evaluate the quarterback position, and we're going to start to assemble the staff. And Donuts brings up a very good point here as we get into the first poll right off the bat. Let's just get into it. Patrick Graham, thoughts on him returning to the silver and black? I don't know if you guys know this. I don't think there's another team. Thanks for voting in the poll. I think we are the only team in the last few decades, if not since the merger, that has not had an assistant coach poached from us to become a head coach. Not a great track record in terms of that. Usually our coaching staffs don't do well and get fired, and people don't want to hire them. Antonio Pierce, not a lot of interviews for him to be the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints, right? Patrick Graham has been somebody consistently, from Josh McDaniels to Antonio Pierce to now Pete Carroll, who is getting head coaching interview jobs. And it's not just a Rooney Rule thing. He has a legitimate chance to get these jobs. And the idea that he was in the mix for Jacksonville and might have gotten it if Liam Cohen didn't do the double agent thing with the Tampa Bay Bucks, and we're not going to talk about the Duval. We're not going to talk about it. The idea that we were able to convince Patrick Graham, and I've seen people say, insiders, that it was Tom Brady with Pete Carroll that was able to convince him to stay here, is important. Now, I've seen some people in the chat say PG won't rush more than 4 people. He's overrated. Look, I've been very critical of Patrick Graham, even though he's been able to get our defense to look better than it has in a while. You have to understand where we came from. Derek Carr never had a top 27 defense, even when we had Khalil Mack and Bruce Irving. Okay? To get the Raiders to play competent defense without committing a lot of turnovers is a plus for Patrick Graham. PG needs to be able to bring in his type of players. We'll talk about the players we can bring in a second. I've been very critical of Patrick Graham's safe approach, it seems, in big moments, right? He doesn't like the blitz a lot. We've seen how successful the Kansas City Chiefs are when you blitz. Here's the difference between Patrick Graham with Josh McDaniels and Antonio Pierce and Patrick Graham now. Patrick Graham is now a part of a coaching staff that had a hand in assembling one of the great defenses of the last 2 decades, the Legion of Boom. Pete Carroll is a defensive minded head coach, not like Josh McDaniels. Yes, like Antonio Pierce, but different from Antonio Pierce because he has experience coaching a Super Bowl winning team with a defense that absolutely destroyed one of the greatest offenses we've ever seen in the 2013 or 2012 Denver Broncos. They dismantled that Peyton Manning team, and Pete Carroll was the orchestrator, right? Along with Gus Bradley and Ken Norton of that defense. So now Patrick Graham, who has a base level to him, right? He's a decent defensive coordinator, if not good, has one of the great defensive coaches of all time to lean on when times don't go particularly well for our defense. This version of Patrick Graham, I think, because of Pete Carroll, is going to be significantly better than the version we've seen with McDaniels and AP, who has been good. So I see some people say, um, Rob Leonard should have gotten the job. I do think it's very important, if for those of you who don't know, Rob Leonard is our defensive line coach, that we were able to hang on to Rob Leonard because that keeps a little bit of consistency and continuity with Patrick Graham. But it also shows people like Max Crosby, hey, you're not going to have to learn this crazy new defense. We might make some tweaks to make it similar to the Legion of Boom, but we're going to keep a lot of the things that you like PG and Rob Leonard in the building. If anything, and I don't think this is why they hired Patrick Graham and Rob Leonard or kept them, but if anything, baseline, if you don't like this hire on a schematic level, at least we can like it in terms of it being able to keep Max Crosby here with us because he appreciates Pete Carroll keeping his guys in office. This is a tweet that I read last night. The Raiders defense ranked top 15 in yardage allowed, like this is a good thing, not a bad thing, under Patrick Graham in back-to-back seasons in 23 and 24. The last time the team accomplished this feat was in 1998 and 1999. Pretty good years for us, 98 and 99. That's the last time we were in the top 15. Patrick Graham has got this defense to be our strong suit. And a lot of people were nervous that Pete Carroll might bring in a Gus Bradley, I see, or a Ken Norton, people who have been terrible with the Raiders. And Pete Carroll has shown, yes, I'm going to bring in some of my guys, like a John Glenn, the linebackers coach, who was the linebacker coach for Pete in the Seattle Seahawks, who is now our linebacker coach. But in terms of getting the best available coordinators, yeah, maybe I'll get my offensive guy in Darrell Bevel, but this guy's already in house. This guy has been interviewing for head coaching jobs. This guy has been consistent in getting our defense to play at a high level, the likes we haven't seen in a couple decades. And last but not least, he was able to keep us in games and have the defense playing hard last year when we got decimated with injuries. Both safeties, Nate Hobbs, Jacorian Bennett didn't start the year with Divine Diablo. Wilkins goes down 3 games in. Kuntz never sees the field. The list goes on and on and on. And as critical as we all are of him sometimes, there is no denying that he was able to do an Aaron Glenn type job with this defense. And I think if we had more success on offense and we won more games and made the playoffs, maybe there's a world in which Patrick Graham could be the coach of the Jets instead of Aaron Glenn. That's very, very interesting. And I see you're saying, Dead Pids, Pat let DeCarron Richardson on an island with Cortland Sutton for 4 quarters. I think you have to take a step back and understand that in this situation, right, with DCAM, we were low corner-wise. We didn't have a lot we can throw out there, and the season was already over. Let's get the young kids some reps against one of the best receivers in our division that we're going to have to compete against for the foreseeable future. I think that's a situation where we can look at that specifically in a nutshell, in a vacuum. Because I remember watching DeCamerion Richardson out there being like, this guy's getting absolutely cooked and worked. But there's really nobody else we can put out there. And yeah, we can double team him, but we got backup safeties and Isaiah Pullman playing. And Jacorian Bennett goes down, who was one of the bright spots. That's another thing to keep in mind. I do think Patrick Graham gets the best out of our young guys, right? Especially in times where we need to do that when we were decimated with injuries. So if I had to say between love it, it's fine, and should have cleaned house. I would say I'm in between. It's fine, and I love it. I don't love it, but I'm happy that he's back because it means the people that wanted him back, like a Max Crosby, stay happy. Although I don't think, again, they went out of their way to hire him just so we can continually listen to players instead of listening to the front office, right? This is also probably a Tom Brady decision with Pete Carroll. Again, you have to understand Pete Carroll, one of the greatest defensive minds of our generation, the 20 somethings, right? He's not just going to hire Patrick Graham because he feels like it. If anything, he probably pitched to him, hey, when I'm gone, maybe you take over as head coach one day, or when we win a lot of games, you can interview for another job down the road. I think that's ultimately my take on that. Now, I did mention this is Patrick Graham adjacent. Tom Pelissero, about an hour ago, said the Raiders are hiring John Glenn as their linebacker coach. A reunion with Pete Carroll, who had Glenn as the linebacker coach for 6 seasons in Seattle. He was Washington's assistant special teams coach last season. I do think that's totally fine with me to get some continuity with Pete Carroll, guys that he knows in the building. I think that's totally fine. The next thing we have to focus on is the OC and the O line. Now, before I get into the O line, which doesn't seem as important, but it is very important in terms of molding these young guys like a DJ Glaze, like a Jackson Powers Johnson, right? Making sure we're getting them to play at the highest level. Let's talk about offensive coordinator because there's an article that I'm going to pull up here. Let's see. The article is, if you want to read it, on sportingnews.com. It was 11 hours ago, and its source is Vic Tafer. Okay. So as I get rid of this poll and we talk about our offensive coordinator options, and I see people already talking about him in the chat, all signs are pointing to Darrell Bevell. So this article starts by saying, when it comes to the offensive coordinator position, that is one that is yet to be filled officially, but we have a clear favorite for the role. Per Vic Tafer of The Athletic, who is a Raiders insider if you don't know, all signs point to the Raiders hiring Miami Dolphins quarterback coach and former Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator Darrell Bevel. Tafer adds that the Raiders still have more candidates to interview, and that was today. This says, from the jump, Darrell Bevell has been considered the favorite for the Raiders vacancy due to his connection to Pete Carroll, who he worked with under while playing in Seattle, while coaching in Seattle, where the pair made it to 2 Super Bowl trips, winning 1. This was a quote from 2017 from Pete Carroll about Darrell Bevell. Shaw, by the way, just was hired by the Lions to be their pass game coordinator, I think. Lions or Broncos? One of those two. I think he's working for the Lions. He got hired by the Broncos, or maybe vice versa. This is a quote from Pete Carroll in 2017. Darrell Bevell has a great reservoir of stuff that he's done, and he's a really good play caller. He finds explosive plays in nearly every game plan. That's important because we struggle in the explosive play department. And that goes to show you that even when we have a strong rushing attack, which we plan to have, he can find a way, Darrell Bevell, to get explosive plays in there. Okay, so under Darrell Bevell, the Seattle Seahawks routinely had an elite rushing attack and top 10 scoring offense. Seattle's offensive ranked in the top 10 scoring 4 times and sported a top 5 rushing attack 4 times. There have been rumblings that Pete Carroll could fully get the band back together with Russell Wilson, who's an impending free agent. If that fit makes sense, they'll go after him, yada, yada, yada. So I gave you the rundown of Darrell Bevell there. He was an elite play caller at the time. Are we still good here? I think we're still good here. So let's talk about Darrell Bevell in the chat when I pin my poll. All right, so let's see. Pin poll, push, pin. Okay, so Darrell Bevell. How do we feel about him? What are our thoughts on Darrell Bevell? Because my thought initially is that I like him, but I don't love him. Make sure, if anybody's still watching, can you see me or hear me in the chat? Because I just got an error message, but I think we're good here. I think everyone's still here. Okay, I'm going to keep going. I like Darrell Bevell. Look, the pass game in Seattle or in Miami, where he just came from, was pretty good, right? And he's, maybe most famous for calling that pass play instead of the run play, right? Okay, you can see me, hear me? Good. I don't know why the poll isn't going out. That's unfortunate. Okay, here's what we'll do because the poll's not going out. I want you to comment what your thoughts are in these four terms of Daryl Bevel. Is it a great option? Is it a solid option, but we can do better? Do you hate it or are you not sure? Those are the comments that I want to see because the poll's not going out for whatever reason. I apologize. Something's acting up with the stream today. But those are your four options. So it's great option, solid but could do better, hate it, or don't know. And then I'll see what people are saying in the chat. I do think you need an offensive mind that is creative and that can run the rock, that can create explosive plays. I would have liked to have gone after, and look, this isn't official yet, but he's the favorite. I would have liked to have gone after a younger option, right? A new, fresh mind to maybe take over when Pete Carroll steps down if you want to go offense, right? I see Dead Pitch says solid option. JS says hate it. Raul says solid, but we can do better. Um, Bennett says, can we steal Chip Kelly from Ohio State? I mean, technically, yeah, we could. We could. Triple says, don't know. I don't know if he knows today's game, but he knows running backs. Well, what I'll say about knowing today's game is that, I mean, he's still in the league. He's working under Mike McDaniel, who definitely knows today's game. You hire me, I appreciate that. I've been known to call a player or two in Madden. That's not terrible. I'd rather go Josh McCown. Look, reports with Josh McCown are that he doesn't want to leave Minnesota unless you give him the bag, the biggie bag, if you will. I wouldn't hate Josh McCown, especially if we go Sam Darnold, which Bleacher Report is predicting we go after Sam Darnold. I see Jackson Dart talk in the chat. There's talk that Jackson Dart is the second best quarterback in this draft. It's going to get crazy. There's something to be said about getting an experienced play caller, especially with whichever quarterback we're going, whether it's younger or whether it's a first-time quarterback in this new system that has called plays at the highest level with Pete Carroll. Again, with similarly to Patrick Graham, there's a baseline here with Darrell Bevel that he can be okay at the very least. He's going to be better than Luke Getsy, clearly. He's going to be better than Scott Turner. And the best thing I would say about Darrell Bevel in particular is that he was able to get a consistent run game going, whether you had Marshawn Lynch or whether you didn't. And it's interesting now that he's the pass game coordinator and not the run game coordinator for the Dolphins. So he can build an elite rushing attack, and he can also point to his resume of being able to create an elite passing attack with the Miami Dolphins. And I see some talk in the chat of maybe Ashton Genty. That could be very interesting. Now, Darrell Bevel, if you want to talk about age, he's 55 years old. Maybe by the time Pete Carroll leaves, if this thing goes successfully and Patrick Graham is already coaching somebody else, maybe Darrell Bevel can take over at the age of 60. I don't know. He's never been a head coach, I don't believe, to my knowledge. So, look, again, of these options, I think it's a solid option, but I think we can do better. That doesn't mean I would be upset if they hire him. And there's a lot of great running backs, not only in the free agent market, but in this draft. Even if you don't go Genty at 6, we're going to have a revamped quarterback room and a revamped running back room. Without a doubt, I can promise you that. Is this the same OC that didn't run Lynch at the 1 yard line of the Super Bowl? Potentially. I don't know if there was an audible there. I don't know if that was a Pete Carroll thing. And I see Raider Rodney. If one of the top two QBs are gone and we grab Abdul Carter, we can wreck the AFC quarterbacks. Yeah, I would say of my options right now, of people who I think are going to be available at 6, if the 2 quarterbacks are gone, I would go Abdul Carter is my number 1 option. Ashton Genty is my number 2 option. And then McMillan out of Arizona would be my number 3 option. But I don't hate Darrell Bevel. Now, for the last 8 or so minutes here, if we could shift gears back to the defense, I kind of pivoted to Darrell Bevel because people were talking about our OC in the chat. Now that we know that Patrick Graham is back and Rob Leonard is back, not only is that a good sign for Max Crosby to get his extension and to not be traded, which I do not see that happening. Again, I said this is different than John Gruden saying, we're not going to trade Khalil Mack, man. We got to sign this guy, and then trades him for a million picks. The reason they did that, and I mentioned that on my YouTube channel. If you don't know, I have a YouTube channel, ALLaBorde Raiders. The reason they did that is because John Gruden's an offensive mind. He wants draft picks. He doesn't want to spend a lot on edge rushers. It just is what it is. He wanted to outscore the Chiefs. Pete Carroll is an offensive mind. Max Crosby is not going anywhere. Now, with that being said, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 impending free agents on the defensive side of the ball that were all starters or projected starters. And one of those guys that I didn't count is K'Lavon Chaisson, who came on at the end of last season. I do think in part because of Patrick Graham. Now, this poll that I just tried to send out didn't work, so I'm not going to risk sending this one out in case it crashes the stream here. But here are the free agents that we have coming up, and I want you guys to comment who is your top priority free agent-wise. Now, I was going to have a poll here that says Marcus Epps, Trayvon Merrick, Robert Spillane, Malcolm Kuntz. I want you to tell me your top priority free agent because here's the guys that we have to re-sign potentially. Adam Butler, John Jenkins, Malcolm Kuntz, K'Lavon Chaisson, Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo, Nate Hobbs, Trayvon Merrick, Marcus Epps, Isaiah Pola-Mao. Isaiah Pola-Mao is the only restricted free agent. I think this bodes extremely well, retaining Patrick Graham and Rob Leonard for at least Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo, Trayvon Merrick, Malcolm Kuntz, and at least John Jenkins or Adam Butler. Obviously, you have Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby. You've got Ja'Cory Bennett, who could be one of your corners. You have Isaiah Pola-Mao, who came on strong at the end of last season. But if you remember the Legion of Boom, right? You had two solid safeties, and not solid, amazing, Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas. You had Richard Sherman. But who was the Super Bowl MVP of the Super Bowl they beat? The Denver Broncos. Does anybody know? I'll let you comment. As I say it right now, Malcolm Smith, linebacker. Who else was on that team that was one of the best linebackers of our generation? Bobby Wagner. I think now with Spy Tech in the building with Pete Carroll, keeping Patrick Graham is going to say, Brandon Browner, wow, what a pull there. Patrick Graham is going to say, I need my linebackers back, Diablo and Spillane. Because if we're going to do this Legion of Boom 2.0, we're going to need our version of Bobby Wagner. We're going to need our version of Malcolm Smith with Spillane and Diablo. With Pete Carroll in the mix now, we can see these guys take even another step into an elite defensive, unit. I also think this could potentially bode well for at least Malcolm Kuntz and K'Lavon Chaisson. Again, defensive line coach Rob Leonard, who might have been able to get a defensive coordinator job somebody else, is staying here. And we can absolutely do better than Diablo, no doubt about it. But what you have to understand is Pete Carroll is now in the building. These players are at least going to get marginally better, if not significantly better. We did have Malcolm Smith for a year or two. So all these guys that I mentioned, Adam Butler, John Jenkins, Malcolm Kuntz, K'Lavon Chaisson, Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo, Nate Hobbs, Trayvon Merrick, Marcus Epps, Isaiah Pola-Mao. Spy Tech is going to have a priority to get a lot of these guys back in the building because this time last year, going into this next season, the Tampa Bay Bucks, their 53-man roster, I think 44 of their 53-man roster were draft picks or unsigned free agents or undrafted free agents. That was a homegrown squad in Tampa Bay. And now, with Spy Tech in the building, the guy who saw firsthand how to reward homegrown talent with Pete Carroll retaining Patrick Graham and our defensive line coach, this feels like they've evaluated the roster on some level and are saying, we want these guys back. We'll add some pieces in the draft, Abdul Carter maybe, or a corner, at least a corner. We'll sign a couple free agents. We'll get Christian Wilkins healthy. It's going to feel like adding Wilkins again. And all of a sudden, this defense, which was top 15 last year with nothing but backups for the most part, Max Crosby didn't play half the games, is going to be something special if Pete Carroll can replicate 75% of what he was able to do in Seattle. I think getting Patrick Graham back bodes extremely well for these guys, upcoming free agents. So let's dig into the chat here. Let's dig into the chat here before I hop off. What do we want to talk about? We got a couple minutes here. Donuts Duncan says resign Polomal, Merrick, Kuntz, Spillane, Caleb Kason, or Caleb Jason, excuse me, and Nate Hobbs. Pogden says Spillane. Raul says Spillane. Spillane, he's all over the field. Malcolm Kuntz. Let Hobbs walk out of here. Maybe he's good, but he gets hurt a lot. Kyle McCord, the Ohio State transfer to Syracuse, could be a sleeper out there. Nothing to do with the defense, but thank you for the comment. Mostly offensive free agency, then go all defense in the draft. Patrick Graham can't coach unless we have the lead. That's my concern. Well, look, we want to have the lead a lot of the time. We want to control the friggin' ball, run the rock, win the time of possession, don't turn the ball over. And I think it's a little unfair to be hypercritical of him last season when we had so many injuries and the offense was terrible. As frustrating as it was to watch the defense at times, they were on the field for like 65% of the game, right? So I think we have to take a step back and make sure we're evaluating him with the proper lens. But I'm happy that he's back. I'm happy that at least Max Crosby is going to stay happy. And it's a risk to go out there and get a defensive coordinator who's not proven. Not sure they re-sign Epps. I don't think they are going to. I think they're going to prioritize Trayvon Merrick and roll with Merrick and Polamalu. Although if they bring Epps back, it wouldn't be terrible. He's just up there in age a little bit compared to these other two guys. All that to say, I'm happy it's not Gus Bradley or Ken Norton. I didn't want to do another version of that. And I'm happy that it is Patrick Graham at the end of the day. My critique was with the amount of man coverages. Hopefully Pete improves that. I do think Pete's going to have a big say on what the scheme is moving forward. Linebackers in coverage, and they just stand there like playing with 8 men, not 11. Yeah, look, I don't deny that he needs to improve. I just think that Pete Carroll with him is going to show him the way. He's going to lead me. Oh, great one. Rex Ryan, I just don't think he would have taken a defensive coordinator job. I think he interviewed for the head coaching job. I think that was going to be it. And Pogden, this is what I'll leave with. I couldn't agree more. There is an air of professionalism about the Raiders. I don't think Patrick Graham was going to come back if AP was still the coach or if somebody else was the coach. But at least we have the ability to convince these guys. Maybe it's not the right move, but at least we can convince them that we want them back and that they will come back. Rob Leonard and Patrick Graham. We'll see what happens with the offensive coordinator, Darrell Revel. That's going to be very interesting. If it's not him, there's other options out there. I'm a Josh McCown guy, maybe Wes Welker potentially. All that to say, thank you so much for watching. We will be back here this time tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern on Bleacher Report every Thursday and Friday. If you're watching in the chat, thank you so much. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, hit that like button, comment away. Please be sure to subscribe. It's free out there, no charge to you. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.